Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and we're back for part two of the discussion of the offense against the Commanders in that third preseason game, the finale. Joining me to talk about it is Jim ZipCode. Jim, how you doing?
Great, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Some great stuff in part one. We did talk a little bit about one of the mailbag questions that came in. Angela, thanks for this question, in terms of whether or not we really wanted Tyler Huntley back. And there was some question of Tyler Huntley wanting money. If that's a question, I'm out on Tyler Huntley.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we came to the only circumstances where we want Tyler Huntley is if Leary is our backup quarterback.
Yeah. So if Rush is elevated to be a starter, Huntley
Yes.
being the backup would be a good thing, which means Huntley should come on the practice squad, not on the roster. Probably, he'd make whatever the roster, the practice squad money is to start with, and then he'd make roster money if he got elevated at that for weeks. So hopefully, that's something that Huntley may or may not have a better opportunity to come along. But if he's on the Ravens practice squad, obviously he can be signed away by another team, and he's at least in the building.
I think it's hard to think coldly analytically about Tyler Huntley because his name flashes across our screen,
Mm-hmm.
and we think with affection of the years he was here and the times he played scrappy, ball for us in an emergency. He didn't actually play great, mind you. Like he's not an upgrade over your standard backup quarterback. There's no reason to I'm with you in reacting with affection to hearing his name, but not so much affection that I think that we need to make a special effort to put him on the roster.
Yeah, we've actually been down this road before in terms
Yeah.
of Tyler Huntley not being enough to get them through Lamar Jackson absences. And in one case, it was an extended absence, and they couldn't make the playoffs because they lost, I think,
Did they win a
six.
game?
Yeah, they might have lost six straight, or they if they didn't, they went 1-6 or something. And then the next year, they had that big win against the Bears that they gave up a touchdown that the Bears should have just knelt and then won the game 13-12 or some such. But the Bears went up, and then the Ravens drove down the field with Huntley to win the game with a touchdown. So anyway, it's not that there were no highlights. He beat Atlanta in that super cold game in Baltimore that got him into the 22 playoffs, and then he played. He had the Ravens hanging in it for the first half and until really the fumble in the
To the
jungle
fourth
ruined
quarter
it. Yeah.
meltdown. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we did discuss that in the first part. We discussed Rasheen Ali and what we think his fate may be. I think he's probably makes the roster. I think it also means likely probably is on IR to start the season, which is a unfortunate but likely move. By the way, they do have to have no, they can use spot 54 or spot 55 on likely, but they have to put him on the initial roster in order to have him available at any time during the season. So they do
That's what
have
I
to use
thought.
one of those two spots or a handshake deal spot. So they might have need for three handshakes since the second spot 55 probably goes to Adisa Isaac as a guy who starts the year on IR, and they
Hmm.
effectively have to carry that spot. And so after that, if they have another guy, and Rasheen Ali be a wonderful guy to have for a midseason replacement, if you could put him on IR sometimes, it's not like he hasn't had a lot of action already in the preseason.
Right.
Might be a guy you would set up for that if you could find the right injury reason. I hear there's some good random number generators that will give you a disease that the guy might have come up with. All right. Now let's talk a little bit about some other elements here. The workload got managed. We talked a little bit on the first episode about the coaches trying to get the game over with. We talked about Ali's 9 carries, 37 for the whole preseason, which is an awful lot for a running back you're definitely going to keep under all circumstances.
Right.
But one guy we agree wasn't overworked is Carson Vincent, who led all of the Ravens in preseason snaps with 191. That was 178 offensive line snaps in one preseason. Unbelievable. And then
They're really
13.
serious about developing him.
Yeah.
And it's neat that the offensive line coach got the guy that he pounded the table for as the developmental tackle that he wanted, and to have him be worth investing that many snaps in, and making it look like it's a worthwhile endeavor. That's really positive, I think.
And I have information on Carson. Let me get my offensive line score sheet here. It's just the easiest place for me to read it from. By the way, this is all out there in the offensive article, but I did want to go through this a little bit. Carson played 62 scored snaps. I think it was either 64 or 65 total, but there were penalties in there that get taken out. Made 52 blocks, missed 6, allowed half a penetration. So he has shared a penetration that created a loss on a run play. And then he had 3 full pressures, all his, no shares with anybody else. Didn't have any quarterback hits, sacks, or penalties. That's terrific. Those are the areas you really need to avoid. And then he scored 45 of a possible 62 points in terms of raw score, which is 0.73. That would put him in the C range to start with. And by the way, last week he finished off in the C range, but he got there only because of his adjustment being exceptional. This week he didn't do a lot outside of his normal efficiency that I just mentioned to earn extra credit points, if you want to call it that, which can only be between 0 and 0.1. So it's not a big component of the score. But he only had 2 blocks in level 2 as opposed to 8 the week before, had 1 pancake as opposed to 4 the week before, and had no highlights as opposed to 5 the week before, which is an amazing total, by the way.
Yeah.
He was 0 for 2 on pulls. So I gave him 0.02 instead of 0.08 as an adjustment. I don't think the players you're playing with were that much above the replacement level, but Washington did play some of their good defensive linemen in this game, including Johnny Newton, who, particularly for the interior lineman, was somebody who is obviously a bigger load to handle. So overall score 75 for Vincent. It was a C. We've talked a little bit about this. Obviously, tremendous that Warhop is so invested in his development. I love the fact that he did pound the table for it. I love the fact that he feels like a lot is on the line for this, when in fact, Warhop could walk away from the game before we even know if Vincent has succeeded. But he has a chance to be a legacy player for Warhop. I mean, he could be the guy who's playing longest in the NFL after Warhop retires.
That's true. I have a question for you about offensive line scoring methods.
Sure.
And I would like to save the question until we talk about Ben Cleveland. So I would like to give you a heads up that is coming.
Okay, let me see. I don't have Ben Cleveland scoring for this game. I only did 3. I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did Vincent, Dellinger, and Bullock. So if the question will work now, I'll take it. And I also want to say I did a podcast on exactly how the scoring system works, because people often ask that question.
Right.
This tells you exactly how the points are awarded on a play-by-play basis. Somebody, by the way, did claim, I saw it out on Reddit or somewhere else, that they'd been through a game with me and we'd gone over the assignments, and they didn't agree with how I assigned things. First of all, I've never done that with anybody, and I would love to, because it would make a great show to do exactly what I expect each line or one lineman to do on each play for an entire
I'm
game.
in, by the way. If you need someone to do that show with, I'm in.
No, it'd be a great show to do. But somebody claimed to do it. It's obviously just someone who's tried to be intentionally derisive, so I'm not going to respond to it. But I will say that if there's someone out there who wants to do that show, and Jim, I'd love to do it with you. It'd be a lot of fun. And most of the things about assignment are not nearly as hidden as people want you to believe, who think they know better. And the main group I'm looking at, that is ex-players. Ex-players think they know so much more about assignment football, and sometimes they know a little bit more, and sometimes they really don't know any more at all. And sometimes, and longtime offensive linemen are going to know more about how the assignment should work than I would, and that's okay. But I can also pick up a lot of things after the play from post-play emotion that are very clear in terms of who missed
who's yelling at whom.
Yeah. Who's the guy running over to the pile to pick the quarterback up? That sort of thing. You really, there's so much available to you that I don't think naturally gets used. But I've never done that with anybody, and I would love to do it. It'd make a great show. So Jim, maybe that would make a lot of sense for us. But anyway, Alec Poulianis did the show where I explained all the scoring weightings. I will say this: all of the magic in offensive line scoring is in the weightings. You pick any competent offensive line analyst out there. PFF is certainly in that group. you stack me in there and pick somebody from the Ravens if you want to. Take anybody else you think is good online. Maybe Coach Evans or somebody like that. We all looked at the same offensive line plays. We would find that in terms of the direction of whether it was a plus or a minus, we'd be in the same
Right.
boat on virtually every single play. Virtually every single play. And the magic is in the weightings. It's in
Totally.
how you weight the relative value of those events. Is how much is a pressure really worth? How much is a sack really worth? And the other part is how you divide those units up in a meaningful amount. So anyway, long story
So
short, is out there.
the question that I wanted to ask was not so much about how your system is designed. I think you've been very transparent about it, and I've been interacting with you over years on this, and reading your O-line scoring and stuff like that. And instead has to do with Daniel Falalele and
Mhm.
Ben Cleveland, and the remarks that players made earlier this offseason, earlier this training camp, about how the Ravens score every practice,
Nick
and they have a
Saban.
yeah, they have a detailed scoring system which he puts a lot more faith in than any online. Like, fine. But it occurs to me, and it may not have occurred to many other people, that, like, I'm going to presume that Daniel Faalele is significantly ahead of Ben Cleveland in the scoring system that the Ravens have been using this training camp. At least for the
Maybe.
purposes of discussion, I would like to assume that.
Okay.
The thing is that it's all about the weighting, right? So
Mhm.
if Daniel Faalele last year, I'm going to say that he was not as bad as a replacement level player. I'm going to say that he was a little ahead of that. Um,
He's definitely better.
Definitely better than that.
Yep.
The thing is, he's not a normal, like, he's not all of the different components of play, where you have strength and you have lateral movement and you have quickness off the line and you have punch and, like, all the other things that go into what an offensive lineman is. Daniel Faalele is not at the same level. If he was like a 6 of 10, he's not a 6 across the board.
Yeah,
You
no
know, he
kidding.
he's spiky, right? He is a high variance player. So he's the kind of guy who, let's say that you have a scoring system that really really values pancakes.
Yep.
I think Faalele can get you a few pancakes. The guy's enormous, and if he misses, just clean woofs on like 3 pass blocking snaps where he doesn't even get a hand on a guy, right? And that guy goes on to pressure the quarterback. It's all in the scoring system. If you are giving him extra credit for highlight blocks, if he blows up a guy because he's 100 pounds heavier than that guy, like, like Faalele could legitimately be well ahead of another player of Cleveland, for example. But if you instead were putting very heavy weight on every negative event, including failure to block, and not really giving much extra credit for pancakes, you could have the exact same play and Cleveland could score better,
Okay, let
right?
me just respond to it because you're hitting on basically all of the elements of the scoring system in terms of your weightings could be A or they could be B.
Yeah.
Let me
So,
just
and
say
I
this,
don't mean you, but this is the Ravens,
right?
like, go ahead,
Let me
please.
try and respond to it first, and then we can talk
Okay.
about what the Ravens are doing because I
Yeah.
think that what the Ravens are doing may be excellent in terms of relative valuations, or it may not be. And
Right.
I'll start with this: the Ravens put up point scoring in every positional room because they're really trying to get the players invested in what's happening in practice and buy into the every snap matters.
Yes.
But what they basically need to do for that is do something like what they did with their offense versus defense scoring that they have for every padded practice, which is basically to come up with a phony baloney weighting system on who won each play
Hmm.
that gives them usually a one or it's usually a one for either team, and it can be a two or a three, depending if it's on a turnover, I believe. But
Okay.
that's basically the range you're working in. Now, first of all, there shouldn't be anybody on earth who believes that even if they gave the defense 3 points for a turnover and they give the offense 1 point for an 8-yard play, let's say, that's a reasonable relative weighting.
No,
The
of course not.
turnover is worth many times more than three
Yeah.
times the 8-yard play. So, or it's worth
They're they're
several times.
they're artificially trying to create weights that give
Exactly.
each unit some, equity, some
Yeah.
possibility of winning.
Now they should. go into more detail in looking at their offensive line scoring, and they pretty much all they would need to do is do something that's different from PFF and has weightings that they like better,
Hmm.
is all they need to do, which includes systems that have been around the NFL for years, like grading individual blocks 0 through 2.5 point increments is something that's been done for a lot of teams for a lot of years. It's imperfect in its own nature. They've looked at penalties, and they certainly have that. Penalties, I am much more draconian in terms of the scoring for it, and I think I have a heap of proof of exactly why that should
Right.
be true that goes with why I've done it. The other thing that is very distinct is that I believe pass blocking is several times as important as run blocking. I don't know
Yep.
whether it's 2 or 2.5, but I can tell you it's like on base relative to slugging percentage in
Hmm.
baseball. On base percentage, much more important by about a 2-to-1 margin is the general analytic wisdom of today, is it's about twice as valuable. It could be more than that because there's much more value exchanged in terms of expected points on pass plays.
Yeah.
And on if your third down plays are generally pass plays, so there's more leverage involved in them, and just there's lots of reasons
It
why.
all makes sense.
So anyway, what I think the Ravens have done, I don't think the Ravens have gone to the extent that I've gone to, probably, to create a system that they really believe represents point for point the value of the place. Now, I'm not saying I've done it perfectly. I'm not aware of another system out there where somebody's trying to relatively value events in a way they have and has information to back that up. And PFF has frankly really blown it because their relative weights on penalties are way undervalued, and their
Hmm.
relative weights for run blocking are way overvalued. So while I think that again, PFF and I would sit down and we'd score the game and we'd say, yeah, that's a good run block, that's a good run block, that's not a good run block, and then we'd have 3 passing plays and we'd have agree on the direction of all those plays and agree that a penalty is bad, obviously in either case. The different weightings that are on those
Right.
are what make the difference in the grades.
Right. And I think I'm trying to say the same thing, but confine it to Faalele in Cleveland.
Uh-huh.
Where I'm saying like if the highlight blocks are overweighted, then Faalele could legitimately win a competition, or if the negative pass blocking plays are more highly weighted than Cleveland. And I'm speaking a little bit in ignorance, right? Because I don't know. I'm not trying to say that
Right.
Cleveland's played especially well this season, but it's all on the weights, and they're pointing to these grading results to saying that Faalele's won. But like, is that meaningful?
I haven't even heard any relative Faalele Cleveland things from the waiting. The only thing I heard was from Nick Samac, who scored pretty poorly this preseason, and he was saying basically he trusts what the Ravens have
Right.
kept more than PFF, and he probably shows up better in that too.
Yeah.
Um, Nick Samac's a 12th offensive lineman on a 10-man roster.
Sure.
He's a guy who probably is going to be unhappy. He probably will be on the round on the practice squad this year. Maybe the Ravens really like him,
But
and
he's
they
informed. He's in the
yeah,
room. He plays the
he's in the
position.
room.
He's
He's
yeah.
in the room. But it is exceptionally frustrating when scoring methods which don't have weightings associated with them all are put forward. And I don't really have any problem with what PFF has done. They've done a marvelous job of informing on a weekly basis
Hmm.
people to relative offensive line play over the years. But the issue that I do have a problem with PFF for is integer scoring of pressure events. I think that's been tremendously misleading. And I'll tell you, here's the big one from this last season. We're going to compare Faalele to another lineman. Faalele for the entire year last year allowed 2.33 sacks. Okay, that's two and
Okay.
a third sacks. How do I come up with two and a third? Because I can divide in any fraction necessary to give a sack responsibility to the various linemen or unblocked players or quarterback or an eligible receiver if necessary, the responsibility for that sack.
Right.
Okay. Tyler Linderbaum last year probably shows up with a 0, maybe a 1 in terms of the sack total on PFF. 3.17 sacks this last year. Now, at least one of those happened on a bad snap, which wasn't an actual sack, but it is a effective sack.
Hmm.
And then he had another. I only gave him a half of the one in the Buffalo game where he snapped the ball over Lamar's head. It was high
Mm.
and right, and Lamar had to go back and get it, and then fumbled it
Yeah.
for one of the big turnovers.
You
You
could
know,
have given that all to him very
could
easily.
I could have, and then the fumble would still be on Lamar, but the sack would be on Linderbaum. But anyway, it just goes through is that the integer scoring of sacks completely misrepresents actual share of sacks. The big case where PFF will not credit a sack to a center is if the center gets walked right back into the quarterback. The quarterback is forced to go outside and then is tackled by the defensive end opposite the right tackle, let's say, because that'd be a
Yeah.
fairly common one. Okay.
Yeah.
Right tackle doesn't get a negative downgrade on the play, by the way. PFF is smart enough to know that. But the center will get a downgrade on the play, but there will be no sack associated with either player. Because if the sack does not come directly from the person who you're blocking, you can't get charged with a sack. And that's ridiculous. It's
It is
beyond
ridiculous.
ridiculous.
The other thing I
So,
don't understand is in the NFL, pass rushers get half sacks,
sure.
but
Yeah.
PFF doesn't acknowledge the half sack.
No, they either give both or they give one. And I've seen them do it both ways. And the situation that they'll name, and by the way, I've given you the wrong impression about PFF because not only do I love the people who work there because they're great and they tend to be very talented and they make great people to come on the show and talk about their new
Yeah.
methods and love their R&D department, but they've got a very antiquated offensive line system that they can't get out from under. It's kind of like the Saints salary cap problem. This is the problem. You end up having to stick with a bad system and the players you have, because if you recant and you create a new offensive line system, you have to change all your scoring, go back, and literally people that you put in the Hall of Fame maybe should not have been there. So it's a very difficult problem to fix. They could just say, hey, you know what? We're coming up with a new system. We're grading it this way from now on. We're leaving our old grading the way it is. And that would be okay. But you just wouldn't have good relative grading then from year to year. They've done some things like
Well,
that,
you'd
by the
have
way.
one discontinuity.
At one point of discontinuity, then you have continuity from presumably from that point forward. If you look at their tackle information, by the way, they've made a more stringent tackle definition, which has caused everybody to look like bad tacklers for a period of years before it grades into the system. So they've got some things that are in there. That said, they give you all 32 teams. They score every play. It's information I want to see.
Yep.
It's great stuff, and their people are smart. They went through a long era before they got Eric Eager, and Eric Eager was terrific. And now they have Timo Riska, who's also terrific. But before Eric Eager, I'm not aware that they had a great in-house mathematician, and that might have been the problem. So they didn't really have someone who was beating the crap out of them about their original offensive line scoring method and saying, hey, this doesn't make any sense. We got to come up with something better.
I've been it's been a few years, I think, but you used to get into Twitter conversations with them over grading of specific plays or whatever, and those were tremendously uh respectful, informed, open on both sides.
I usually do it by DM. I'm not looking to.
Yeah,
I'm
but there
not
was a
looking
time,
to.
right? Is it
Yeah.
Gordon that I'm thinking of?
Oh, Gordon's terrific. He'll tell you right away what
And I've
it
seen
is.
him change his scoring on a play,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So there's no doubt in my mind that they are people of good faith and intellectual honesty who are, working to do what they can. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So
Let's keep
point. So I inspired a long PFF. I don't want to say rant discussion from you. But the part that I want to focus on is, because us fans have been hyper focused on, why doesn't Ben Cleveland get a chance? Is Daniel Falalele, going to get Lamar
Yeah.
killed? All that kind of thing. And the typical refrain we have heard is that Falalele has outscored Ben Cleveland in training camp. And no, well, I haven't heard those exact words, right? But Cleveland hasn't beaten out Falalele, right? And the scoring system has been mentioned. And people don't talk about the weights, like you
Right.
could weight, like if if one guy has bigger positive events and more negative events, like that matters.
Let me just answer this. Everybody's looking for that one play which exactly matches their narrative on a player. And so that's why people will say, oh, look at this. Oh, my God, you can't let the quarterback get killed because look at Falalele get run over. Well, guess what? Falalele and Cleveland each had one play that looked almost identical in backup weeks.
Right.
Falalele also played 12 snaps in that game where he gave up that hideous sack, but he played 309 snaps in the last 5 games of last year. And during those 309 snaps, he allowed one penetration. That's a loss on a run play. He allowed 2 total pressures. It was a half in the first Pittsburgh game and a 1.5 in the Cleveland game. 0 quarterback hits, 0 sacks, had 0 penalties. You don't need to even know what the weightings are to know he's going to score very well on that. Now, he did have a fair number of missed blocks in that game. Missed, let's see, 12, 18, and 17.
Run
36. Well, they were a combination of run and pass. He had 36 missed blocks. Some of those have been losses at the line of scrimmage where he got pushed back, but it wasn't a pressure. But it looked like he could have gotten beat if something would have happened. And others would have been misses in the run game. And given who he is, it's probably mostly misses in the run game. But I don't have him divided out, so I don't want to make an assertion about it that I can't back up with data. He is the ultimate player in terms of function over form. Pass blocking is more important. He's better at that. Run blocking, he looks like a complete clod at, but it's the less important of the two things to be good at. He avoided penalties completely after week 10 of last year. Huge. That has tremendous value. And those are the reasons why he looks so good at the end of the season. And his last 5 grades were B, A, B minus, A, A minus. And that includes the playoff games. It won't work in the playoffs. It did work in the playoffs last year for Daniel Falele. It worked fine. He wasn't the problem at all.
Yeah. Another interesting thing, I heard a former player, who's doing commentary say this about him: when Falele gets his hands on a pass rusher, the pass rush is over.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a generalization, but he's a very good pass blocker. So he gets beat for that play in the preseason. I thought the best line I heard about it was Monken saying that just because you have film of a guy going into church doesn't make him a good Christian.
Monken is a gem.
Yeah,
I am very high on Falele this season. There's the last 5 games that you refer to, and then how he spent his offseason with the offensive line coach, and then dropping 20 pounds. If he's 2% quicker off the snap than he was last year, and he was a decent guard last year, then he's going to be a better than decent guard this year. I think that this is going to be a good O-line. I think he's going to be part of the reason why. Even if he's the weak link, he's not going to be the catastrophically weak link.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's a solid C- guard for the entire year after a pretty hideous start through 14 games, and then he just completely turned it around. Frankly, but the 5 games before he turned it around, he had D, D, C-, D, D. In the 5 games before, and then he was, I mentioned the 5 great games.
Yeah.
The most recent data is the most pertinent.
Of course.
The most recent data is the most pertinent. So the fact that he didn't play well against Philadelphia or the Giants, or Cincinnati, it's not good, but it's also older data and
first-time starter under a first-year offensive line coach who took over after the death during training camp of the other offensive line coach, and he's dropped 20 pounds this offseason, and he's worked to improve his technique. He should be a decent player.
Yeah, and he's not. This is important. He's not Warhop's guy specifically. He's Coach Joe D's guy,
right?
And Warhop inherited him and could have easily switched horses.
Absolutely, and didn't.
But didn't do it. And then he ended up playing extremely well at the end of the year. And I think he's now one of Warhop's guys.
Yeah.
He does not get the kind of coaching in your faceness that Vincent gets at practice. Vincent gets OTAs were just all about Warhop yelling at Vincent. It's actually not yelling at him as much as just telling him what to do after every single rep, because his habits are so awful in terms of having, extending his arms, things like basic stuff. Anyway, we've talked enough about Daniel Falele for one episode. We've talked enough, frankly, about Carson Vincent as well. I want to talk about 2 more offensive linemen pretty quickly. So Garrett Dellinger was in. Let's talk about Corey Bullock first, because he was in for the first 21 snaps. So the best that Washington had to offer, he was on the field to face. 21 plays, 17 blocks, 3 missed. He did allow 1 pressure where he got walked back. 15 points, 0.71 per play, an adjustment of 0.05. That's 1 point higher than Vincent scored, but he's also at center, which has a different grading curve. And so it's a D at center. He did some positive things with this. He had 7 blocks in level 2, 1 pancake, and 3 highlights, which got him up from 0.71 to 0.76 after adjustment. So it was a great mobility game. He only played 21 snaps to get 7 opportunities in level 2. And two highlight combination blocks were among those. Another nice pancake in level 2. Very high on Corey Bullock at this point. I know a D wouldn't say that to you, but he's just clearly won the backup center role. There's nobody competing with him for it, and having a guy who can play center and presumably could also play guard who's big like that, I
Yeah.
really like him as an option for this year, and I love him as an option for next year.
So assuming that Tyler Linderbaum's going to price himself out of staying.
Yeah, if that were to happen.
Well, that's
And
exciting to have a good option, and you're the knock on Linderbaum, if there is one, is size and mass, and and Bullock's not a small guy. I would like to retain Linderbaum, but of course, the money has to be right.
they're talking 20 million today. Somebody put out something that is
Somebody was,
completely unfounded.
yeah, yeah. I don't. I mean, I would go to over the cap and find the top 10 center salaries
Well,
and
it's
see what
18
they are.
million is the current top. So if it's 17 or 18 million, 17 is what Jurgens signed for. 18 million is what Creed Humphrey signed for a year ago. I think if it's 18 million, it's the absolute top I would pay, and I really would not certainly be excited about it. And I might force Linderbaum to wait till late in the season to get it.
Is he? I mean, is he Creed Humphrey?
Nope.
Yeah, he's not. So I don't know. Well, Ken, I
No.
wanted Creed so bad in that draft. I'm still mad about it.
Would have been a
I was
great pick.
excited about Linderbaum as methadone for not having gotten, because it was a Creed hangover that made me get excited about
Mhm.
Linderbaum.
All right, let's continue to move on and talk
Yeah.
about Dellinger a little bit here. So Bullock, while it was a D game, I think I'm still optimistic that he'll play well. Dellinger had a pretty decent game: 41 plays, 34 blocks, 4 missed, 1.5 penetrations. This is where Dellinger had some problems as a run blocker in this game. The Ravens had a number of runs for losses in this game. Dellinger was responsible for 1.5 of those. He did allow only 1 pressure in the game, which I think is pretty good. He was up against Newton some during this game, so that's positive. They frankly had a decent defensive line that they put up against the Ravens in this game. 29 points, 0.71 per play. Also, an adjustment of 0.04, which is less, but because he's at guard, he fits in at the bottom of the C range at a C minus. 2 level 2 blocks, 1 pancake, and made his only pull. The thing I'll say about Dellinger is I think he brings the requisite mobility that the Ravens need out of the guard position. So I think he can either fill in at right guard and give them mobility to move to the left, or he can fill in at left guard and give them mobility that they have apparently already with Voorhees at least some minimal level. And the Ravens, as I've said many times, have a great track record of mediocre athletes being able to pull from left guard.
Yeah. Is that mediocre athlete? How? Excuse me, some short circuiting here. Usually, when I hear that the Ravens have a great track record of
Mm-hmm.
an offensive lineman doing something well, I think, oh, yeah, because Lamar is here. But a mediocre athlete pulling to the right, Lamar's not helping that
No,
happen.
no. I mean, if it doesn't help Falalele pull that Lamar is who he is.
Yeah,
Falalele, the thing that they've tried several times now, twice at least during the regular season and once during the preseason this year, was to get Falalele to try and pull left to reset a pocket where they have a pass play. So it's not like it's not like they're anyway. They in each of those 3 cases, he had to try and block an edge rusher, and it's just nowhere near quick enough to do that. And that's just something you have to live with who Faalele is. And it's
right.
okay because he does a whole bunch of other things well. And you got to understand that can't be part of your scheme. It's not constraining.
No.
The Ravens rushed for 5.9 yards per carry last year as a team. It's just not a constraint at all. So,
And they led the league. Their quarterback led the league in net yards per attempt. Like whatever
yeah,
constraints they were suffering through last year, they did just fine.
let's suffer
Good for
again.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. And then, so with Dellinger, I'm optimistic that he also could be a center option for next year if that's the way they want to go with it. But having 2 guys that could potentially fill that role is good. I'm not keen on letting him float to the practice squad or float to
Hmm.
the waiver wire. I think
Dellinger,
there's a little
really.
Dellinger. I think it's a little bit too much risk. Now, what's interesting is the Ravens put Dalcourt in before Dellinger. So Dalcourt was a practice squad guy all of last year, who was a center guard I thought might make the team last year. Bullock is clearly in a position where he's the backup center, but It's very interesting. I don't know that the Ravens might have a gamesmanship component to this, or they just are a little bit higher on Dalcourt. It could legitimately be that. But
Maybe they think that most of the league's personnel evaluators are going to be like me and fall asleep during the fourth quarter of the preseason game.
or just look at charts of when people played
Yeah,
and
yeah,
say, hey, look, Dalcourt played before Dellinger. Obviously, the Ravens like him better. Let's pick him.
yeah.
Yeah.
So many
All right.
layers to the game.
All right, let's go back. We need to make sure we get to some other things. And I guess the next thing would be talking about individual players. So, who would you pick out from this game that you really want to talk about their individual performance? Maybe something it showed you, or something you learned from it.
So I think that I've actually blown my magazine here, right? Because I talked about Rush in part one, and we talked at length about Rasheen Ali in part one. And the
You,
guy
you can
that
talk
I'm
about Cooper Rush. I don't think you said too many of the things about Cooper Rush, but what did you like about him?
Well, I liked how he looked like a veteran quarterback operating an offense against a bad team. He got him to the line. He threw decisively. He made his reads quick. Like he showed enough arm. I thought he looked like he was better than the environment. Like he looked like a veteran quarterback. And I think that after game one, a lot of us Ravens fans had fear about the backup quarterback situation, and I think that he's shown that he showed a level of professionalism and capability running a vanilla offense. Knowing where the reads were, where to go with the ball, making good throws, some of them tight window throws. I just liked it. It was reassuring on a number of levels to watch him operate the offense. To me,
Mhm. I agree with that. I think that's a very good point to make. Is that he really did a great job standing in and throwing against a defense that was probably not quite at the right level.
hmm
It's not like they didn't have some good stars on the defensive line. We just talked about that a little bit, and they did actually juice up some blitzes. They were not rushing, particularly early in the game. They weren't rushing four very often. They were rushing more often. Sending five, sending six, really giving pressure looks to Rush. And then Rush knew how to get rid of the ball hot.
knew exactly what to do
Is
against it.
is that a bad characteristic when we saw what happened to Anthony Richardson in week one when he did not know how to get rid of the ball hot? Not
Yeah.
only did he not get rid of the ball hot, he got injured on the play, and then his coach hung him out to dry in the
hmm
interview after the game. I just
Yep.
unbelievable trifecta of bad. Yeah.
He didn't. I'm gonna make it a tetrafecta because he didn't know he was hot. It seemed to me, so like an additional layer to it. Yeah, yeah, I watch a lot of JT O'Sullivan, the QB school. Well,
Mhm.
anytime he does a Lamar breakdown anyway, I watch it, and he is obsessed with the quarterback knowing when he's hot and knowing where to go. Who his hot read is,
Mhm.
and his early, by early I mean 2019, 2020, maybe 21 reservations about Lamar was that Lamar didn't seem to know when he was hot. And then after a couple years, grudgingly, he was saying, "Well, I guess Lamar is the hot read. I guess that's okay."
Mhm.
But it's the perspective of a journeyman professional quarterback who is limited athletically and damn well needs to know where the blitz is coming from and what his reaction is going to be. And Cooper Rush, I think Cooper Rush would have made JTO happy in this game.
Two straight very good games for Rush, and I don't think there's. I didn't have a lot of confidence in him after that first game against the Colts, but he's looked so good in these last two. I'm back to no problem.
Yeah, and it's to
He's
me,
our
it's
guy.
not. It doesn't have to do with what he. It doesn't have to do with padding stats and looking great against a defense that, frankly, was not a great defense. It
Mhm.
more had to do with operating the offense and making decisions. Recognizing that he's hot, knowing where to go with the ball when he's hot, doing that decisively. Like those are the kinds of things that a quarterback needs to do. That's more impressive to me than throwing a seven from the backup quarterback than throwing like a 60-yard bomb or running for 30 yards to escape a pass rusher.
Okay, I know who I want to talk about, and this is be an oddball player. I'm sure I'm not taking one away from you. I want to talk about Xavier Guillory.
Do it.
Now, he played a fair number of snaps, but he was targeted four times. I believe he caught all four balls. And I'm searching through from my notes for how many he played 25 snaps, and I believe he caught four out of four balls. Now, he'd barely been targeted, or no, 3 out of 5. That was it. 3 out of 5 for 17 yards. So not a big yardage total, by the way. Leary is throwing to him, and the Washington got a fair amount of pressure in the game. By the way, Rush was pressured on 3 of his 5 dropbacks. He got 1 ball out quick and 1 ample time and space. It's not a good opportunity set he had, and yet he completed 5 out of 5 passes.
Yep,
and
great.
drove him on those 2 touchdown drives. Now, Leary was not obviously nearly as good. Here's what I'm going to say about Guillory. He had a very impressive practice or two, including at the stadium when he had a nice day catching the ball. Is probably the best player on the field that day. What I think is a compelling reason to try and keep him on the practice squad. He's not making the team, but to keep him on the practice squad would be the Ravens practice squad is very old in terms of their receivers, relying on players like Miller and Kirkwood.
Yep.
Now Miller has this secondary value as a return man, but Miller's caught like 1 ball in 3 years or 4 years now. Maybe it's 3 still. I think it's 1 ball since 2021. So I guess 22 to 24. Not to make it any worse than it is, because it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
He caught one ball during that period. Kirkwood has a similar kind of hasn't had a football thrown to him. I think he's had 11 balls. Well, I have them up right here. He has had 11 catches since his rookie year in 2018. So that's from 2019 to 2023. He's caught a total of 11 balls. He's also, both those guys are over 30. I believe they're either both going to be 31 or maybe both going to be 32 this year. Is it time for the Ravens to get younger on the practice squad at wide receiver, or do they need those practice squad guys just to be the right now guy, so it doesn't really matter their age as long as they know they're practicing well and as long as they know they can handle a very limited responsibility when they get in there? Or should they have a developmental wide receiver there that is younger and maybe they like for a possibility of being around in the future?
So, like you, I lean towards get younger all the time. My counter argument, or I'm going to say devil's advocate here, I'm not sure how much I believe this, is Zay Flowers is young, uh, Wester is young,
Mm-hmm.
Tez Walker is young.
Yep.
That's
Bateman is signed for a long time.
Bateman is signed, yeah, and he's 24, right? Bateman is, he's not old. Um, so I'm going to say that maybe on the active roster, they have enough youth and they need maybe a little professionalism off the practice squad. If God forbid they need somebody off the practice squad. And I also think that there's a upper limit to how much development you can do. What did we
Yeah.
list? 3 or 4 players? Like that's a lot of development going on. You need some guys who are finished.
Okay. So last year, let's look at that for a second. The guys they brought off the practice squad to play football for them include 3 guys plus one other guy they acquired. The guy they acquired is Deontay Johnson. And
Okay.
that was one of the biggest toss yourself down a well players that the Ravens have had in recent years. Just had completely self-destructive
Yep.
Player. So it's amazing. People still keep making excuses for him and blaming Harbaugh for the fact that he didn't get the football.
He refused to go into a game.
He refused to go into a game,
That's the one thing you absolutely can't do. I mean, if he was hurt, sure, but that's not what happened.
I mean, there was that, and then he went to another team and got cut for apparently the same reason. And he'd also left Pittsburgh because of being unhappy, and he had left. It had been, I guess, released by Carolina, right? It was, or no,
Yeah.
it was a trade.
No, it was a trade. It was a trade.
It was a trade. Oh.
I mean, they gave up nothing for him. It was not an expensive trade.
And nothing was too much, as it turned out. But it seriously would have been just taking on Deontay Johnson if you knew what he was going to do for the team. That was too much to take on his salary and do that. But anyway, it was what it was. That's number one. Number two, they brought up Miller, and Miller, he returned a couple punts, I think, during the season because they had just about everybody try it at one point or another. And I think he caught one pass for 16 yards at one point. They brought in Kirkwood. He caught about 5 balls last year, which is his high since his rookie year, but still was not a lot you're getting out of an older receiver there. And then they brought in Sims to return punts because they had a lot of problems with not getting set under punts to field them and having that cost the Ravens some field position late in the year. And Sims gave them one nice reverse in the Pittsburgh game, and he also gave them some not so great punt returning in terms because everybody pretty much contributed to that problem last year. I just there's nothing about those four players that says, give me more of that.
Hmm.
And it wasn't like it was only one player. Well, you can't blame him because that's just one player. It's four guys.
Right.
There's four different older guys that they basically tried out to try and give them some offensive juice. And the one guy they didn't give a chance to was Dayton Wade, a
Yeah.
younger player. And I don't know what's going on at practice. So it's very possible that Dayton Wade was fumbling the football regularly, or he wasn't
Hmm.
getting under punts either, and that's why he never got a chance. But Dayton Wade was a superstar in the 2024 preseason.
Right.
So I was a little surprised he did not get a chance.
He left the game with what, an injury to his arm or something like that?
Yeah, so I think shoulder, and I seriously hope that's for a lot of reasons. I hope that's not a serious injury because the Ravens need him back available at some point potentially for the practice squad. Because if Wester went down, he's the 1-for-1 replacement. He'd be the guy who
Hmm.
they'd bring up, I think, to return punts. They could move Wallace back there. They could do some other things, but he's the obvious guy who could do both the punt return and the gadgetry
Yeah.
on offense. He looked good on the play. And then they both got hurt. Hamilton was the guy who tackled him and he returned. Wade did not. And apparently that might be more serious. So he may be heading to the.
I did not like the way he was holding his shoulder as
Mhm.
his arm next to his body as he was going off the field.
Yeah. So it could easily be a separated shoulder or a, we were hoping as we saw it, we were hoping it was a stinger.
Yeah.
But it wasn't apparently was not that from some of the discussion after the fact, which means he might be headed for an injury settlement. He might be out some significant time. The Ravens can't carry him on their roster. I wouldn't think he's the kind of player
Yeah.
you'd you'd stick your neck out to get Ben Cleveland off the roster and add Wade and then make the change prior to week one. I don't think they'll do that for Wade. But if they do release him on an injury settlement, then they maybe could still get him back.
Yeah.
So you'd have that possibility. And so, anyway, I hope it works out. I hope the injury is not serious. I hope he makes it through waivers, which I'm sure he will, and that the Ravens get him on the practice squad, and everything's okay. But that was a bummer, and it can end up costing you a rookie salary for the whole year from your salary cap if he can't play.
Right.
So, anyway, that's my spiel about young receivers versus old and why I'd like the Ravens practice squad to be constructed a little differently. Doesn't mean they can't have one veteran. Go ahead and have one veteran if you want that has some specific needs, but otherwise I'd have some young guys.
What do you think of Malik Cunningham?
Um, I don't understand why they really keep him around. They don't
Okay.
activate him on game day, so he's not a third quarterback option. So they don't have a there's not real value there. He's been a special teams player who's contributed a little bit. Am I excited about him as a receiver? No.
Yeah. Okay.
No. How about you?
I was actually looking for information. I was excited about the idea of him when it was reported that we were going to
Mhm.
acquire him. But if it's come to nothing, then it is what it is.
All right. How about another player you'd like to talk about?
Well, so it's unfair to use this guy because he did not get a target in the game, but I have been excited all preseason about Tez Walker.
Okay. Yep. No,
I
that's
think.
I.
Go ahead. No.
I think it's fair. He played 25 snaps in this game, but they didn't target him, and it's very clear to me what they're trying to do with Tez Walker last week, which is Monken really forcing him
Hmm.
to run routes that are outside his comfort zone and that complement some of his speed. And I'm sure Tez Walker would love it if every route called for him was a 7, 8, or 9. But he needs to have some comeback in his game in order to exploit the speed
And he
and
showed it, and he
yeah,
caught stuff. I mean,
yep.
like he was the guy for that quarter of that game. I mean, it showed to me that there is a dimension of completeness, that there could be a dimension of completeness to him as a player. That there's meat on that bone. There could be something there.
Yeah, I'm with you entirely. I thought I was very um, optimistic about that outcome. I thought he was one of the Ravens' best players, and in terms of growth from where he was before to
Yeah.
what I then think of him, it's a big positive. Um, lots to like about that.
You remember, do you not, what Steve Smith said about him pre-draft?
No, what do you say?
Steve Smith said, uh, if uh, he had a lot of issues with the NCAA and transferred schools and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Smith said that if Tez Walker could get in one place and stay with one coaching system and work with a wide receiver coach. The next year, which is this year, next year he could take somebody's job.
Okay, well, that Hopkins' job is up on the table to be taken. uh, okay, there is another player I want to talk about. And that's Lucas Scott.
Yeah.
We talked about him briefly in the first episode. He's been very effective as a blocker. I personally, I think he could jump in and take Ricard's spot in 2025. There is a limited set of teams that may actually look at him this year and try and get him away from the Ravens. Possibly not with a waiver claim, but possibly by telling Lucas Scott, hey, look, you've shown you can do all Ricard can do. We work with a fullback system. You're much more likely to get an opportunity here because our fullback is either not that good or whatever. Come to us, and that's how they lost Ben Mason. They didn't lose Ben
Yeah.
Mason to a waiver claim. He got
No.
signed away to a different practice squad after waiver claims were completed.
So that happened, and then Ben Mason wound up back with the Ravens.
As a used dish rag of a player there
That's right.
a little
Yes.
bit later. Now, I'm, it did happen that way, and obviously Ben Mason's not part of their plans going forward, or he'd be here now.
Right.
I'm not even sure if he's in the NFL. He probably is with the Chargers. He probably is somewhere within the Harbaugh tree.
Yes, you
I
would
would
think
guess
so.
if he is still around in the NFL. But they're obviously very upset about exactly how that worked out. There was one day at practice this summer where Scott got 5 targets in perhaps a 10-play sequence.
Whoa.
So they had tried at least very hard to get him involved in the offense in the way that they've used Patrick Ricard.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of similar stuff, a few out routes. Nothing was, he didn't run a wheel route or anything like that down the line of scrimmage. The most, what do I call it? Daring fullback running play, a fullback pass play that I remember the Ravens running was the first play of Super Bowl 47 when Vontae Leach, go back to the play, they had 2 weeks to work this up, ran out and caught an 8-yard pass. And he had never, Vontae Leach, he had one pattern he basically wrote. He had a little 0-yard out or a 3-yard out. He would run towards the sideline and he would catch the ball and then he would go down, go out of bounds, whatever it would be. But the very first play of Super Bowl 47 is an 8-yard pass to Vontae Leach.
They saw something on film, I guess.
Yeah, they did. And they figured out how they could potentially exploit it and they got it done. When you have time to create a game plan, you can do some cool things.
So I can see Lucas Scott being Patrick Ricard's successor. It's very, very easy to see. And it's easy to envision Patrick Ricard's career ending fairly soon. He's been playing for a while, and there aren't many competitors for the services of a big guy fullback. There's the Chargers, but they got somebody, I think, last year.
Yep.
Kyle Shanahan likes himself a fullback, but he likes a mobile fullback who can catch. He likes Kyle Juszczyk. And I wouldn't call Lucas Scott that. I wouldn't call Patrick Ricard that. So I assume that there's not going to be a lot of competition to get Lucas Scott onto the practice squad.
By the way, Ben Mason has 0 preseason snaps in 2025 for what it's worth. And he is a guy he would be playing if he were on somebody's roster.
No, man, he's locked up a spot. They're keeping him hidden.
Yeah, I think it's the number of total teams who use a fullback is fairly small. So the group is small, but the group is hyper focused on each other.
That's true.
So although the fullback teams all know that Baltimore is usually trying to develop a backup fullback, the same way they know Baltimore's trying to develop a backup kicker all the time.
Yeah. Okay. I'm bummed, by the way, that DaCosta didn't flip. Who was the kicker that we had in camp? The UDFA kicker? How come?
Yeah, Hoyland.
How come DaCosta didn't flip him for another 5th-round draft pick? That seems
it would have been nice, but I don't know that they really thought they had the time to do both. And they've got Loop we can talk about him if you want, but they got Loop to a really good spot. He had kicked so many short kicks during camp. And by the way, he made something like 58 of 62 at one point. And then maybe he had another miss or two after that. But he had a fantastic camp, making 90% plus of his field goals.
Yeah.
Then when you went to, and that was during those first I guess it was 17 practices because I was at all of those.
Okay.
So then starting with the 18th, I wasn't there anymore. I haven't followed since whether he's had a couple of misses or not. But they were all short kicks, or there were a lot of short kicks, and there were a few long kicks. And Horton, when he was at the podium, would talk about it. He's the special teams coordinator for the Ravens. He
Hmm.
would say 80% of the field goals are inside 40 yards. We want to first concentrate on being good at that, and then we'll get us some long opportunities as time allows. And that includes point after touchdowns, by the way,
Right.
which don't have the same weighting, of course, as
But they
field
are a
goals.
field goal in terms
But
of length.
they're a place kick, but they're not an equally weighted place kick. Is my point. So
Okay.
you want to be good at the 3-point kicks, and you want to be good at the 3-point kicks on the margin. I probably would argue against a strategy where you just build his confidence with a bunch of short kicks. But Randy Brown is the kicker whisperer, and
Yes.
he will have a strategy that's very good for it. The last point I want to make about Loop, though, was during these preseason games, he's missed now 2 kicks, I think, but they've had him kick a lot of long ones, and it's not just the 61-yarder. It's I think he might have had a 51, a 52, and a
Hmm.
53
Yep.
that he made. So they've gotten him the distance needed, and he's going into the season in a very good place. I would project right now that he'll be better than the last 3 years of Justin Tucker in aggregate. So
Yeah.
like last 3 years of Justin Tucker, he wasn't probably was above average in terms of field goals plus extra points expected. He was
Hmm.
probably above average. That's the really important kicker stat. And if I think that Loop should be better than that. I think Loop will be above average, maybe by 3 to 5 points would be my marker in this first season.
And he's cheaper, and there's a lot of baggage he does not carry. And this is a weird thing to say, but Justin Tucker, if you think about it, really did the organization a favor by having a horrible, messy scandal blow up exactly as he lost his ability to kick.
Yeah, it's if you listen to Harbaugh, they were thinking about replacing kickers anyway because the end they're coming to the end with Justin Tucker, and they last year, he even said, Justin's got to make some kicks.
Yep.
He was at that point with him in terms of that. I don't think the scandal is ever a good thing. Imagine if the scandal had cost them the Mike Green draft pick.
Right.
That would have been just a horrible side effect
That's true.
for the entire thing. So it didn't. As it turned out, every other team, had basically the same reaction to Mike Green. It was clearly a first round talent
Hmm.
drafted in the second round, and the Ravens got a real value.
Yeah.
All right. I think we answered the major question in the first show, which was the question from Ange Love. So I
Hmm.
appreciate that. But offensive MVPs for the game. Do you want to go 3, 2, 1 on those?
I'm sorry, Ken. I know that this is a major lapse, a major failure, but the third preseason game and
Okay,
MVP, Cooper
fair enough.
Rush. Cooper
Okay.
Rush.
Cooper Rush is the MVP. I'll give you my 3, 2, 1s because one of them we didn't talk about yet. So number 3 for me is Lucas Scott, who
Hmm.
I thought did everything that could be asked for him in a game where the Redskins or the Commanders knew the run was coming. He was in there blocking and doing the best he could, and I thought he did a good job. LeJontay Wester, I thought, was the only receiver who looked exceptional. He had a nice run after the catch
Hmm.
for one of his gain of about 22, I think, and caught 2 balls for 28, if I recall correctly. And then Cooper Rush is number 1.
Yeah,
Reasonable?
absolutely. I might throw Carson Vincent for going the distance every snap, being the Iron Man of the game.
He's on my honorable mention list along with Ben Cleveland, who played well in this game too. So I guess maybe we'll talk about one more thing before we call it.
Yeah.
I posed a question because I'm hoping somebody will answer it in a way that makes them the obvious candidate for do the concerns episode on this. But I posed the question on Twitter. What's your concern level 0 to 10 for Fa'alele? What's your concern level 0 to 10 for Voorhees? And what's your concern level 0 to 10 for the backup guard depth that the Ravens have?
So 10 is catastrophically concerned the sky is
Yeah,
falling.
that's
0 is
right.
utterly confident.
Yep.
Um, this is a weird scale for me because I'm having like what would 5 or 6 what would be the middle? What would
Moderately concerned.
I My concern is honestly fairly low for Fa'alele. I'm gonna say maybe a 4.
Okay. You're definitely on the low side. Most people who would answer this, but it's also kind of like putting a microphone out in the middle of a town square and saying,
Yeah, yeah.
putting a sign in front of it that says "It's like fair." The people who are going to jump up to that microphone and talk about it are not the people who are doing exceptionally well. So,
I was
um,
more concerned about Fa'alele at the end of last year. Um, and I think the combination of things that we've talked about on this podcast in part one have kind of had a cumulative effect on me, which is if I always play at the end of last year, his report and the report of teammates and reporters and his coaches about how he spent his off season and how he looks physically coming into this camp, and the fact that no one seems to have mounted a serious challenge to him, and that it's year two of Warhop. Like there's a and he played decently last year. Like he as a first year starter, the cumulative effect has worn down my concern on Faalele, which may have been as high as a 7 at one point to
okay,
below medium.
okay. I could have easily overreacted at camp and last year when I couldn't believe they were had him playing guard. I would have been an 8 or an 8.5
Hmm.
at that point. One thing you'd never want to do if you're just going to be a practical, rational analyst is ever become wedded to a position. So
Yeah,
the occurrences as they've occurred have been positive in general for Faalele, and they particularly the most recent information is outstanding. So I've flipped myself, and I'd probably be at a 3 in terms of my concern
yeah.
with Faalele this year. Not 0,
After the
but
Raiders game, I was a good solid 9.
okay. All right. So now Voorhees, what's your level of concern there?
Less than Faalele. I'm less concerned about Voorhees than Faalele.
Okay. I
A
still think
3. I don't know. I need
okay.
to see it on the field, but I think he was a good enough prospect to be highly rated before he had the injury, and then he's had a couple years in the system, and he's supposedly looked good in camp. Like he should have been a decent player by scouting reports, and he seems to be. So the talent is there and the coaching is there. He should be fine.
Okay. He's a player that I don't want to yo-yo on right now. And he did not play he played poorly at the beginning of last year. Very simply poorly. And then he in the came back and had a good game late in the year when McCary had some sort of IBS problem or a stomach virus, whatever it was, where he came out after 6 snaps. I think it was in week 18. And he went in and he played well. That was a really nice marker, by the way. You want to have something to point to going into this
Mhm.
camp.
Yeah,
This camp, there's very little to tell about who Voorhees is as a player until you get to actual preseason games because there's so much brother-in-law play happening. But Voorhees has looked so good in 31 snaps um, that it's hard to come up with an argument why he wouldn't be good, other than that's half a game of total activity, and I wouldn't want to overreact to half a game of really high play because I know how much variation there is from week to week for offensive
right,
linemen. I
right,
see it all. I see it in the chart I create every week.
right.
So it's just I have a hard time believing that he's that good, given where he was last year. So what I said is I want to see about 90 to 120 more snaps before I'm really convinced he's a different player who's
Is
reached
that
another
2 games?
level. Yeah, 120 would be 2 games. Yeah, and I'm willing to let this 30 from preseason count as the first 30 towards it.
Hmm.
But another 90. Let's say that. Yeah,
Yeah, so
game and a half.
I think that's reasonable. I just, he, yeah, I'm not as concerned. He projected to be a good player. First year starter, he looked bad. Then he made some adjustments. Like the narrative is there. Like he ought to be a good player, and the current reports are that he seems to be. So I'm buying it.
Okay. All right, great. And then the offensive line, the guard depth as a whole. Where are you on that?
There is a cap on how worried I can be about backup guards in
Mm-hmm.
general, right? So like every other position is like I'm much more concerned about Lamar getting his foot stepped on than I am about any backup guard.
Right.
I'm much more concerned about Rashad Bateman. Like everything is of but in terms of how important the concern about a backup guard could possibly be, I'm
Mm-hmm.
at about max. I don't
Okay.
think that so
So you're allowed. You assume that the scale is self-weighting. If you put it on a 0 to 10 scale, we're still going to say, but that gets a scalar of 0.3
Okay.
because backup guard play is not that important.
Okay. So it's
Zero to
going to
ten
be
at
an
20.
8 for me, but
Okay,
it's of 1% importance in the scale of the team.
yeah, that's perfectly reasonable way to think of it. Then I'm going to say I'm not even a little bit concerned about it. First of all, I
Oh,
think the
really?
guys the guys they have are good. For backup guards, they're very good. In Cleveland, Dellinger and Bullock being
Hmm.
the three primary guys who could. And am I forgetting somebody? Because one of them is a center, so it feels like I'm forgetting somebody that they really have four guys. Let me
Did
go
you
to my
say
roster
Dalcourt?
here real quick. I did not say Dalcourt, so Dalcourt would be another guy. I guess they do have Vincent and Opum, so it's 4 and 6. It should be yeah, it's three. It's three backup guards because they have three starting interior offensive linemen. So the math works out. So anyway, the three guys that they have, not only do I think they're pretty good, I don't think there's all that much of a difference between them and the starters. I think
Okay.
that the starters are somewhat ahead of them, but I wouldn't expect them to be like the difference between Kevin Zeitler and a 2023 backup guard for the Ravens.
All right.
I'm expecting them to be like not a huge drop off if they happen to play, and I think they all could do it. Just it's not a huge step down, so I'm fairly optimistic about the backup guard quality.
I think that I probably feel the same way about the first guard off the bench. And I think that if we are going two guards deep, then my concern blows up.
Okay, all right, fair enough, and that probably would be true just about anywhere that you get in the
Yeah.
second. It's you almost consider that a nuclear scenario when you
Well, the
have to,
nuclear scenario is what happened with our tackles in was it 2020 or 2021?
or the 21-22 Lamar injury might be the nuclear. Let's take everything else off nuclear.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, yeah. All right, but yeah, you're right. That tackle situation was about as bad as it can be.
I
About
have a long-running argument with the X-Elector on the Ravens forum. I'm sorry, on the RSR forum about when and why Lamar put on weight.
he's been up and down over the years, but he's
Yes,
back in a down cycle now where he's playing lighter, thinner,
fast. Yeah,
elusiver. Yeah.
yeah. I say, well, and I think the timing proves this. Lamar did not gain that weight to run the Greg Roman offense. Lamar put on that weight after he lived through the season with no tackles, and he put on the weight to better hold ground in the pocket and complete passes while being tugged on and pulled on.
Hmm.
So it was a
Not sure
reaction
that's
to poor play by the tackles.
okay. And that we've seen in the years since, in particular in 23 and 24, that Lamar makes magic on extended plays
Hmm.
where, he's got to do it on his own anyway for a
Right.
lot of it. Hopefully the offensive line will hold up as long as they can. But yeah, that is, if you're going to be concerned about offensive line play, the offensive line does not have zero to do with Lamar being successful on extended plays. They still have to
Hmm.
maintain blocks, recover, and make new blocks when the pocket breaks down. I mean, they've got responsibilities. They've got to not go downfield illegally.
Right. Yeah.
So they've got a lot to do. By the way, that's one of the things I've really liked about Corey Bullock so far. The
Yeah.
guy, and this seems to be something Warhop is teaching them well. They seem to run along a line that is 1 yard downfield, which is the maximum they're really allowed under the way
Yeah.
they officiate it typically. So they know how to run that line until they see the ball out, and it
Interesting.
it it really looks like that is a specifically coached in. The only guy I've seen break it so far, and I had a downgrade for him when it did, was Samac. That he
Interesting.
he was 3 yards downfield, and then he sheepishly walked back. And that's the worst thing you could do is you're giving up that you did it. I'm sorry. Let me put these stolen baseball cards back here.
I feel like Joe D, is it possible that he taught them timing rather than, no, that's not possible because Lamar still does too many. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, tough situation. Anyway, Let's call it there, Jim. Always great talking football with you. It's
Ken,
just a
we've
pleasure.
made it. We've made it. The preseason slate is over. We made it through the goddamn draft. We made it through a summer of goddamn Bills users, fans bragging about the stupid MVP vote. We made it through training camp. We made it through 3 preseason games. The revenge tour is finally upon us. We have survived probably the most trying period of this year for us. Knock on wood. This
Yeah,
sound is me knocking on my wooden tabletop.
yeah.
I mean,
It's
this we got here. Thank
it,
God.
it's been a very long off season. Obviously, after that began effectively with the Andrews drop,
Yeah,
and the difficulty in Buffalo in that game. But it hasn't been not fun. I've enjoyed working with people in the draft, including you, Jim. I've
yeah.
included all the fun things we do in a typical off season to the expectation series and looking ahead to the next season, going to camp. I've enjoyed all that. It's not like I'm wallowing in that loss. I've been kept too busy kind of to do
The
it.
circle of
And
life, yeah, goes on.
yeah, really appreciate the listeners in particular, but I do appreciate also people like you who are always give their time to be on the show and talk football. Tell
Well,
folks where
Ken,
they
I
can.
can't tell you how much I appreciate the invites. I'm sorry, in answer to your question, I'm on Blue Sky at Jim ZipCode. I'm on Twitter at Jim ZipCode, and I have a Substack this year. It's Zip Drive and Dish. And after every Ravens game, probably Wednesday, there'll be an article about the Ravens pass catchers and whatever else caught my attention in that game.
All right, outstanding. Make sure you give that a follow and let's get a sampling of what Jim is offering. There's some interesting stuff there, I guarantee you. Other folks out there, if you want to be in on the Concern series, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. Otherwise, just thanks for listening. Jim, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.